Hello, I want to consult about our recent sales performance has been disappointing. It has been in the red for several months. Any insights on why this is happening?
It seems our sales strategy might need a revamp. We are facing challenges that require immediate attention.
I can't ignore the financial strain anymore. What steps should we take to turn this around?
Are you having trouble running your business? Let's do Ack Company help you.
Good evening and welcome to Economics Today. I'm your host Estella. Tonight we have a special guest, Lele, an economic consultant from Global Economic Advisors to Ack Company. Lele, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Estella. It's great to be.
Lele, let's start with federal fund rate. Recently, the Federal Reserve increased this rate. Can you explain what the federal fund rate is and why this change is significant?
Certainly, Estella. The federal funds rate is the interest rate at which banks lend reserve to each other overnight. By increasing this rate, the Federal Reserve aims to make borrowing more expensive, which helps to slow down inflation by reducing spending and borrowing.
And how does this affect the average consumer?
Higher interest rates mean higher costs for loans and mortgages, which can lead to reduced consumer spending. This helps to bring down inflation but can also slow economic growth.
That makes sense. Are there any other implications for businesses?
Yeah, businesses may face higher borrowing costs for expansion and operations, potentially leading to reduce investment and hiring.
Okay, moving on to the discount rate. We have seen changes here as well. What is the discount rate and how does it relate to the federal fund rate?
The discount rate is the interest rate charged by central banks on loans to commercial banks, while the federal funds rate influences interbank lending. The discount rate directly affects the cost of borrowing for a bank from the central bank. An increase in the discount rate similarly discourages borrowing, helping to control inflation.
How does this impact banks and their customers?
Higher discount rates increase the cost of funds for banks, which can lead to higher interest rates on loans for a customer, affecting both personal and business loans.
Are there any specific sector that may feel this impact more acutely?
Yes, sectors reliant on heavy borrowing like construction and real estate can be more significantly affected by a higher interest rates.
Okay, now let's talk about the real exchange rate. There's been a lot of discussion about capital inflows and their impact. Can you elaborate on this?
Sure, the real exchange rate adjusts the nominal exchange rate for differences in price levels between countries. Capital inflows like foreign investment increase the demand for our currency, which can lead to an appreciation for the real exchange rate.
And how does this impact our economy?
A higher real exchange rate may makes our exports more expensive and imports cheaper. This can affect the trade balance and overall economic growth.
Okay, and what could be the long-term effects of sustained capital inflows?
Sustained capital inflows could lead to a persistent appreciation for our currency, potentially harming our export sector, leading to a trade deficit.
The nominal exchange rate has been quite volatile lately. Can you explain what influences this rate?
The nominal exchange rate is the rate at which one currency can be exchanged for another. It's influenced by factors such as interest rates, economic stability, and market speculation. Changes in these factors can cause fluctuations in the exchange rate.
How do these fluctuations affect international trade?
A stronger currency makes exports more expensive and imports cheaper, potentially reducing export competitiveness and increasing import levels.
Are there any policies that can help stabilize the exchange rate?
Central banks can intervene by buying or selling foreign currency to stabilize exchange rates. And they can also adjust interest rate to influence currency value.
Okay, and finally, let's discuss capital outflows and exchange rate intervention. How do these dynamics work?
Capital outflows occur when investors move their money out of a country, increasing the demand for foreign currency. This can drive up the exchange rate. Central banks can intervene by selling foreign currency reserve and buying domestic currency to stabilize the exchange rate.
Can you give us a recent example?
Sure. Recently, the Bank of Japan intervened by selling US dollars and buying yen to counteract the rise in the exchange rate caused by capital outflows. This intervention helped stabilize the yen.
What are the risks of such interventions?
The main risk is the interventions can deplete foreign currency reserve and may not always be effective if market forces are too strong. Additionally, frequent interventions can lead to market instability.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lele. This has been incredibly insightful. Understanding these economic policies help us grasp how they impact our daily lives and the broader economy. That's all for tonight's episode for Economics Today. Join us next time as we explore more about economic trends and policies. Good night.
Good afternoon, Bayok. I have been reading a lot about various economic challenges recently. Can you help me understand how events like the US-China trade war, foreign companies leaving China, the real assets crisis, and the stock market crash affect China's economy? And what kind of policy responses would be appropriate for these issues?
Good afternoon. I would be happy to explain the topic to you. Firstly, let's discuss the US-China trade war. The imposition of tariffs and trade barriers has significantly decreased Chinese export to the US, which directly reduced aggregate demand. This trade war has also increased business uncertainty, leading to lower investment and reduced consumer confidence, further impacting aggregate demand negatively. Secondly, the departure of foreign companies from China is another critical issue. When foreign companies leave, there is a direct reduction in foreign direct investment with lower aggregate demand. Additionally, job loss and decreased income from this exit reduce consumption. The exit of this company also means a loss of advanced technologies and management practice, slowing productivity growth and affecting the economy's long-term potential. Moving to the real estate crisis. This is a significant concern as well. A crisis in the real estate sector leads to a decline in investment, which is a component of aggregate demand. Falling real estate price reduced household wealth, leading to decreased consumption. Moreover, the crisis can strain financial institutions, reducing borrowing and spending. The stock market crash reduced household wealth through the real effects, leading to lower consumption. It also made it harder for companies to raise capital, reducing business investment. Consumer and business confidence can take a hit, leading to cutback in spending and investment. All these shocks shift the aggregate demand curve to the left, resulting in lower equilibrium output and a lower price level in the short run. Over the long run, the economy's productive capacity may suffer, leading to lower real GDP and overpriced. And short-run aggregate supply curve shift to the right to restore equilibrium, as you can see at point C, with unchanged output and a lower price level compared to point A. To address these short-run fluctuations, the Chinese government should increase government spending on infrastructure and public investment to offset the decline in private investment. Temporary tax cuts could stimulate household consumption, while subsidies and support to affect industry can stabilize the market. The Central Bank of China should consider lowering interest rates to encourage borrowing and investment. Quantitative easing could broaden the money supply and lower long-term interest rates. Moreover, target lending facility can ensure liquidity in critical sectors like real estate and manufacturing.
Thank you so much. That was very informative. I appreciate the detailed explanation, and this helped me a lot of understanding how the situation goes.
You're welcome. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to our business consulting session. Today, we're discussing a significant economic event. The European Union sanctions on Russian seaborne crude oil and petroleum products following Russia's invasion of Ukraine. These sanctions have sent energy prices soaring to historic highs. I have an insightful session lined up to explore this topic from multiple angles. To begin, let's understand why these sanctions cause energy prices to rise sharply. Imagine the energy market represented by supply and demand curves. Before the sanctions, the supply of crude oil and petroleum products was stable. However, with the import ban, the aggregate supply curve shifted leftward due to the reduction in available oil. This leftward shift signifies a decrease in aggregate supply, which consequently drives up prices. Precisely, the reduction in supply creates a scarcity of oil, pushing the equilibrium price higher. This is a classic case of supply shock, where reduced availability leads to higher prices. Now, let's discuss how this sanction affects the overall price levels in the European Union in the short run. The immediate effect is inflation, as higher energy prices increase the cost of goods and services. This situation can be illustrated using the short-run Phillips curve. The Phillips curve shows the inverse relationship between inflation and unemployment. With the rise in energy prices, inflation rates increase, shifting economy along the curve from point A to point B, where both inflation and unemployment rates are higher. Higher production costs due to expensive energy can lead to reduced output and increased unemployment, adding to the economic strain.
In the face of rising inflation, what monetary policy should the EU authorities implement?
To combat inflation, a contractionary monetary policy is appropriate. This involves reducing government spending or increasing taxes to decrease the overall demand in the economy. Lower demand can help in reducing price levels, thus addressing inflation. Applying contractionary monetary policy to combat inflation will shift the economy from point A to point B on the Phillips curve. However, this policy might lead to higher unemployment, as lower demand could reduce business revenues and thus their ability to maintain current employment levels.
On the other hand, if EU faces a recession due to the sanction, what monetary policy should be considered?
An expansionary monetary policy would be suitable. This policy includes lowering interest rates and increasing the money supply to stimulate economic activity. Low interest rates make borrowing cheaper, encouraging spending and investment, which can help reduce unemployment and spur economic growth. But this approach can further increase inflation, as more money in the economy boosts demands and prices, as indicated by the shift from point A to point C on the Phillips curve.
Is it possible to the EU to use a single policy to simultaneously solve both inflation and recession problems?
Unfortunately, a single policy cannot effectively address both inflation and recession at the same time. This is due to the inherent trade-off between inflation and unemployment. Contractionary policies reduce inflation but increase unemployment, while expansionary policies reduce unemployment but increase inflation. Thus, EU authorities must carefully evaluate the current economic conditions to decide whether to prioritize reducing inflation or combating recession. In conclusion, the EU sanctions on Russian energy imports have complex economic ramifications. Addressing this requires a nuanced approach, balancing between controlling inflation and managing unemployment. We hope this session has provided you with a clear understanding of the economic dynamics at play and the policy options available. Thank you.
Hi, Consultant Alex.
Hi.
I have a question about quantitative easing. Could you please explain why, in the past decade, major economies like the USA, Japan, or the EU use the QE to deal with recession problems, and how it works when conventional monetary policies fail?
Certainly. During severe recessions, these economies could no longer use conventional monetary policy to lower short-term interest rates due to the liquidity trap in the money market. They choose QE to lower longer-term interest rates and stimulate the economy by increasing aggregate demand.
Can you explain why increasing the money supply cannot lower the short-term interest rate in a liquidity trap?
Of course, let's look at a graph of the money market. At the low interest rates, the money demand curve becomes perfectly elastic, indicating a liquidity tap. This means that any increase in the money supply, shifting the money supply curve from MS1 to MS2, won't lower the interest rate further. People prefer holding cash over bonds, so the interest rate remains stuck near zero. Furthermore, QE has several effects. Firstly, by purchasing long-term securities, QE pushes down bond yields, which in turn lower interest rates on other loans, such as mortgages, making borrowers cheaper and encouraging spending. Secondly, QE stimulates asset prices because the cash received by the bondholders is often used to purchase other assets like shares or property, driving their prices up. This increase in assets price boosts wealth and further encourages consumption and investment.
What exactly is quantitative easing and how does it differ from conventional monetary policy?
To understand this, we need to discuss two types of monetary policy, conventional and unconventional. Conventional monetary policy includes adjusting interest rates conducting open market operations, and setting bank reserve requirements. Unconventional monetary policy includes quantitative easing, forward guidance, collateral adjustments, and negative interest rates. In a severe recession, conventional policy might not suffice even when short-term rates are near zero. That's when central banks use quantitative easing. By purchasing long-term securities, QE aims to lower long-term interest rates. Unlike conventional policy that focuses on short-term rates, this helps in boosting economy activity when conventional methods are not enough.
Can you give an example of QE in the USA during the recession?
Certainly, during the recession, the US Federal Reserve implemented several rounds of QE to stimulate the economy. In the first round, 2008 to 2010, the Fed purchased $1.2 trillion in mortgage-backed security (MBS). This increased the Fed's balance sheet from $885 billion before the recession to $2.2 trillion by the end of 2008. The second round, 2010 to 2011, involved buying $600 billion in long-term Treasury securities. The third round, 2012 to 2014, included an open-ended commitment to purchase $40 billion in MBS per month, later expanding to include $45 billion in long-term Treasury per month. These actions swelled the Fed's balance sheet to approximately $4.5 trillion by 2015. By 2014, the Fed began tapering its QE purchases, and in 2018, it started reducing its balance sheet, signaling a shift towards normalizing monetary policy.
How does QE increase aggregate demand?
Great question. QE lowered long-term interest rates by purchasing longer-term securities. This encourages borrowing and spending by business and consumers, boosting economic activity. Higher asset prices increase wealth and consumption. A weaker currency from lower rates boosts exports, and more bank reserves improve lending capacity. To break it down, lower borrowing costs, reduce long-term interest rates, make loans cheaper, encouraging businesses to invest and consumers to spend. For wealth effect, it increases asset price, make people feel wealthier, which boosts their spending. For currency depreciation, its lower interest rates can lead to a weak currency, making exports cheaper and more competitive internationally. And finally, improve credit availability. Increased reserve in the banking system enhance banks' ability to lend, further stimulating economy activity.
Can you show how the QE affects aggregate demand and supply using a model?
Certainly. QE shifts the aggregate demand curve from AD1 to AD2, increasing output from Y1 to Y2 and raising the price level from P1 to P2. This shift occurs because lower interest rates stimulate investment and consumption. Increased wealth from higher asset price boosts spending. A weaker currency increases export. Enhanced bank lending capacity improves credit availability. In this diagram, QE shifts aggregate demand to the right, leading to an increase in both price level and real GDP. Thus, QE can stimulate aggregate demand and help pull an economy out of recession.
Thank you so much, Consultant Ax. And that really clarifies how QE works and its impact on the economy.
You're welcome.
Oh, hello, this is Pluto, consultant from Ack Company. How can I help you?
Hello, Mr. Pluto. I'm beginner in investing in US stocks, and I have a few questions about the USA macroeconomics. For the first question, in the United States, the Republican Party follows the principle of supply-side economics, whereas the Democrat Party follows the principle of demand-side. Can you explain the differences between supply-side economics and demand-side economics?
Sure. Let's explore supply-side economics, also known as Reagan economics. This approach focuses on stimulating economic growth by boosting the production of goods and services. and demand-side economics, also known as Keynesian economics. This approach focuses on stimulating economic growth by boosting consumer demand. The difference is included supply-side economic, concentrates on increasing the supply of goods and services by enhancing business investments and reduce barriers to production. And demand-side economics focuses on increasing the consumer demand through government spending and tax policy that favor lower-income individuals. First, tax policy. About the supply-side economics, advocates for lower taxes on the wealthy and business to encourage investment. Demand-side economics support higher tax on the wealthy to fund government spending and lower tax for the middle and lower classes to boost consumer spending. Second, role of government. Supply-side economic favors a smaller role for government in the economy, advocating for deregulation and lower taxes. And demand-side economics supports a more active government role, using spending and fiscal policy to directly stimulate demand and create jobs. And the last one, impact on wealth distribution. Supply-side economics often leads to a concentration of wealth among high-income individuals and corporations, with the hope that benefits will trickle down to the rest of the economy. Demand-side economics aims to redistribute wealth more equitably, ensuring that lower-income individuals have more spending power to stimulate economic growth.
For the second question, following that, can you explain why President Trump implemented tax cut policies, why President Biden implemented tax increase policies?
Of course. First, let's talk about President Trump implemented a significant tax cuts to boost economic growth. The key components, including boosting economic growth, increasing disposable income, reducing income taxes, aim to stimulate economic growth through higher consumer spending and investment, encourage investment, lowering taxes to corporations and high-income earners was intended to spur business investment and job creation. Second, philosophical beliefs. Supply-side economics based on the idea that lower taxes boost production and investment, with benefits trickling down to the broader population. Limited government role aim to reduce government size, believing the private sector drive economic growth more efficiently. Criticism. Increasing budget deficit. Critics argue that tax cuts mainly benefit the wealthy, reducing government revenue and increasing deficits. Reducing public service. Concerns about funding for infrastructure and social programs that benefit lower-income individuals. Now, let's talk about Biden tax increases. In contrast, President Biden focuses on increasing taxes on corporations and the wealthy for raised government revenue. The key components, including raising government revenue, funding public goods, higher tax aim to finance infrastructure, healthcare and education, economic redistribution, addressing income inequality by funding programs for lower-income individuals. Second, demand-side economics, supporting consumer demand influenced by Keynesian economics using tax revenue to fund social programs and boost economic growth from the bottom up. Sustainable growth, investing in public goods for long-term benefits like a skilled workforce. Criticism, reduce incentives, higher taxes could reduce incentive for work and investment, potentially slowing economic growth. Economic slowdown risk, concern that a higher tax might dampen economic activity by reducing disposable income for high earners.
For the third question, the corporate tax rate was reduced to encourage domestic investment. How can this policy influence the market for loanable funds in the USA? Specifically, what happens to the real interest rate, net capital outflow, real exchange rate, and the trade balance in the USA? And may I have a graphical analysis too?
Sure. Now, let's talk about demand for loanable funds. Trump's policy by providing more funds to business through tax cuts could raise the demand for loanable funds as businesses have more money available for investment. Second, real interest rate. With a higher demand for loans, the real interest rate might
decrease.
Lowering interest rates can further stimulate business investment. And net capital outflow. As a domestic investment becomes more appealing due to the tax, net capital outflow could rise. This means more capital is moving out of the country to invest elsewhere. Fourth, real exchange rate. If the reduction of the corporate tax rate leads to increased domestic investment, it could strengthen to the demand for the domestic currency. This appreciation of the real exchange rate makes the currency stronger compared to others. And the trade balance. A stronger domestic currency can lead to a decrease in export and increase in imports. This shift can potentially worsen the trade balance as it becomes more expensive for the other countries to buy domestic goods, while cheaper imports would flock to the domestic market.
For the fourth question, Trump levied a high tariff on imported goods to reduce the trade deficit of the USA. How can this tariff policy influence the market for foreign currency exchange? And what happens to the real exchange rate and the trade balance? I would like a graphical analysis for this as well.
Now, let's talk about the effect on foreign currency exchange market. First, supply of dollars. Trump's tariff policy could reduce the supply of dollars in the foreign exchange market because fewer dollars are needed to purchase foreign goods due to the higher tariffs. Demand for dollars. The demand for dollars may initially increase as foreigners buy fewer US goods. However, this effect is often smaller compared to the decrease in supply. Real exchange rate. With fewer dollars in the foreign exchange rate market, the real exchange rate might depreciate. This means the dollar becomes weaker compared to other currencies. The trade balance. Initially, the trade balance might improve as the volume of imports decreases due to the higher price from tariff. Tariff could provoke retaliation from trading partners and disrupt global trade relationships. A stronger dollar resulting from initial change in the supply and demand for dollars could offset the improved trade balance by making US export more expensive and imports cheaper in the long run.
Many economists oppose Trump's tariff policy, believing it couldn't solve the trade imbalance problem with China. Can you explain why economists think that way?
Sure. Yes, let's talk about the job losses and economic harm. Many economists indicate that reducing tariffs could prevent further economic harm and job losses. Critics argue that the tariffs were based on the outdated notions of trade and failed to address the root cause of that trade imbalance. Instead of mitigating the imbalance, the tariff worsened it, merely shifting deficits globally. Many economists highlight that the tariffs did not tackle key economic distortions in China, such as high domestic saving and low domestic consumption, which drive China's trade surpluses. These surpluses are not effectively managed by tariff, as they do not address the flow of Chinese saving into the US capital markets, resulting in trade deficit with other countries instead of imbalancing trade with China directly. And the global trade dynamics. The tariff policy oversimplified the complexity of global trade by focusing on bilateral trade deficits, which are outdated concepts in today's interconnected global economy. Trade imbalances are more accurately transmitted through capital flows rather than direct trade accounts. Tariff on Chinese goods fail to consider the broader global nature of these imbalances. indirect economic impacts. The approach of calculating job losses based on bilateral trade figures was flawed, failing to account for the indirect economic impact of the tariff and the complex way of which global trade affects employment and investment. Consequently, Trump's tariff policy did not address the fundamental economic issues, causing trade imbalance, and instead led to higher overall deficit and economic disruption. In summary, former President Trump's tariff policy on China was ineffective for several reasons. It resulted in significant job losses and economic harm without addressing the root causes of the trade imbalance. It failed to tackle core economic distortion in China, such as high domestic saving and low consumption. It oversimplified global trade dynamics by focusing on the bilateral trade deficits instead of capital flows. It employed a flawed approach to calculating job losses, leading to higher deficits and economic disruption.